All right, so for our next section, we're going to direct our attention to this area right here for what we call value. On this example here, I used brown. And you can use whatever color you want as long as it's not too light. So don't use yellow, don't use orange, don't use yellow-green, okay? So value is the range between light and dark. So in this example, we are going to be creating 5. And in my drawing class, we actually call these by number. The lightest value possible we call a 1. The darkest value possible we call a 5. So the middle one is a 3, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to achieve 2 things. We want each section to look even and consistent, and we want all 5 to move in equal steps, equal increments of lightness and darkness changes, okay? So in order to do that, we're going to do the 1 and the 5 first. Now, the 1 is just white, right? So really, we're kind of done with it. However, if you're using a color, I recommend hold your pencil up high, loose, and relaxed, and just barely touch it to the paper, and just dance it around a little bit, just to give it the slightest tone of whatever color you're using. So mine's going to look a tiny, tiny bit purple, if at all. In fact, you can probably barely even see it on the screen. I'm stopping right there, right? Just barely there. We want it to be pretty much white, but I'm making it a purple white in my case, okay? And then now we're going to skip all the way down here to the 5. And the way we do that is we're going to establish this edge, this dark edge right here between the 5 and the 4. Establish the edge and then color off of it. Now, don't grind your pencil straight into the paper. Just try to do an initial level of tone at first, okay? Kind of like when we were practicing doing the red circle up here. Just an initial level of tone to start off with. Starting at your edges, pulling in, changing your directions if it looks inconsistent. Now, the reason we can do this one pretty quick is now that I've got my initial level of tone, now I want to make it solid dark, okay? So I'm going to use my pencil, and now I'm going to really, really press in. I'm just trying to make it as solid dark as I can get it to go with this pencil. If I had a black pencil, then this would be solid black, right? In this case, it's going to be solid violet. Now, if you finish before me, don't skip ahead, because there's a very important order in which we do these. Okay? All right, so I've got my 1 and my 5 done, and this is important because the next one I'm going to do is the 3, the one that's in the middle. And the reason I'm going to do the middle next is because I want the middle to look like it's exactly in between the 1 and the 5. And now that I have the 1 and the 5 as a reference for that, I can do that. Now here's the key. You're going to start at that edge and get it started, but just do a gentle level of tone, probably just a little bit lighter than you think you need to go, okay? Because we can always add tone and make it darker when we need to. It's more of a pain to have to try to make it lighter if we went too dark, okay? So do that, and remember, you're trying to make it look nice, even, and consistent. Make sure there's no stuff on the bottom of your paper. There we go. Okay. Remember, your goal is to make it even and consistent. So ideally, I don't want one side of it to look darker than the other. But what I'm going to do right now is pause and I'm going to evaluate it. Okay? So here's how I evaluate it. First, I look at it, and the question I'm asking is, does this look closer to the 1 or does it look closer to the 5? And one little trick to help me do that is sometimes I will squint my eyes at it to sort of blur it so I can just get that perspective. And would you guys agree with me that I'm a little closer to the 1 right now? So if I'm a little closer to the 1, I'm just going to go back at it and give it one more level of tone, or however many levels of tone I think it needs, so that the answer is neither. You want the answer to be, it's not closer to the 1 or closer to the 5. It's right in between. That's what we're trying to achieve, is right in between. I would say this is one of the most important ones in order to get the value scale correct. So I think I'm just about there. I think I'm good. So when you feel like you're good with your 3 value, now we're going to do the 2. The 2 is a little more challenging because you don't want it to be dark at all, right? You need it to be an even step between the 1 and the 3, assuming you got your 3 right. So what I'll do is I'll just gently start here, barely touch the paper, and go for it. Squint my eyes at it. It'll go pretty quick. Just don't press hard. Change your angle if it got directional on you. I got a little something under my paper that's causing a little spot there, but that's okay. All right, I think I have my 2 value there. And now the 4 value is last. The 4 value, in my opinion, is probably the easiest one, okay? First, what I'm going to do is establish a defined edge between the 3 and the 4, right there, making it darker than the 3. And now I will pull off of that line like this. Now, the reason I say the 4 is the easiest because it's very dark. It's just not solid dark. So all the extra effort you went into to make the 5 look solid dark, you're just not going to do that to the 4. But beyond that, the 4 is going to be pretty dark. It's got to be darker than the 3. If we were using black and white, the 4 would probably be described as dark charcoal gray. And it's also easy because I don't have to worry about staying in the lines on the bottom down here because the 5 should already be as dark as you can get it to be. And if it's not already as dark as you can get it to be, this is probably about the time you're going to notice that. So if that happens to you, just redefine that edge right there and then pull off of it real dark like that. And then you'll get the edge back. Okay. All right. So there is value. We have a value scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, trying to make them equal increments and nice and consistent. And it will help us out a lot when we're doing our shading for form. Okay, students, this section right down here is going to be all about space. My hand right here takes up space. It's positive space. In the area in and around the fingers, we call that negative space. When it comes to drawing, all these circles would be positive space, and all the empty white space we call negative space. So that's one way we think of space. We also think of space as overlapping. When something overlaps something else, we're automatically creating a sense of distance and space. We also see space when things get smaller as they get further away, or lines angle inward as they get further away. So we're going to be creating a general example using space, kind of like this one. But it can be very different. Here's one that's in progress. You see it's a little bit different. Let's take a look. We're going to start off with our pencil. And right out here, we're going to create a really gentle erasable horizon line. And then overlapping that, I'll make a mountain shape. So it's kind of a triangle there, but the bottom, maybe it's kind of curved like that. And it's below the horizon line. And then we will underlap behind it, maybe underlap behind that. Underlap one behind it, and then underlap one behind that, going off the paper. Now, if you're interested, when you put things in the sky like a cloud, you would do bigger cloud toward the top, but then smaller, thinner, closer together, far away. All right, so from the horizon line here, which you can't see, I'm going to pull a line this way and this way, and that creates the sense of a path, right? That could be a road, that could be a trail, that could be a river, it could be a valley that's getting further away, it could be whatever we want. Now, once we have this, we can start thinking in terms of foreground, middle ground, and background. So this is sort of like background, far away stuff. This general area here, I'll think of as middle ground, okay? Maybe I put kind of a tree here. And it's overlapping my mountains. That's allowed and that's okay, all right? I could put another tree here, just maybe a little bigger. Bigger, but the bottom is closer to the bottom of the paper. So this is closer to us than that one. Maybe a bush, a medium-sized bush right there in the middle. So this is middle ground. And then suppose I'm peering over a big bush that's right in front of me. It's in the foreground. It's in the foreground. So maybe coming off of the paper right here, kind of do a bush like that. And there you go. Now I'm going to use my Sharpie marker and I'm going to start inking this thing. And when you ink it, just be careful not to ink the lines that you don't need, okay? I'm doing these trees first because they're overlapping my mountains a little bit. Do that little clouds. Pull this line and that line, but I'll stop there. Now, this bush in my foreground is going to have a lot of texture to it and detail. So I'm going to just do that with my Sharpie. I'll just kind of put in some bushy texture. Because things in the foreground, you want them to draw more attention than things that are further away. And that creates the illusion of space. Okay, so I've got it all Sharpied up here and inked. So I'll use my eraser and eliminate my pencil lines that I don't need. And now I'm ready to color. So I'm going to give you some tips on coloring. First of all, I have this picture here. It's unrelated, but check out the sky. See how the sky is kind of normal and then it gets lighter as it goes down? That creates a sense of a realistic sky, doesn't it? So you can make your sky whatever color you want, but if you make it get lighter as you go down, it'll look good, all right? Second, look at my ground right here. Do you notice way off in the distance? It's kind of dull and faded. And then as you come forward toward the bottom of the paper, it gets more vibrant. We're pressing harder with the color. So that also adds to the illusion, okay? So let's see what that does for us. Make a gentle blue sky up there, but I'll make it kind of fade toward light as it goes down. So the normal sky color, whatever I want the sky color to be, you can make the sky orange, you can make it purple or yellow, whatever you want. Just make it get lighter as you go down. Suppose my mountains are brown. One little key is put some color on one side and make it get a little bit lighter as you go to the other side, and it'll look more like a 3D type of a mountain. And then this one underlapping behind it, I'll go dark right at that line, so it sort of looks like there's a little shadow there, right? And then I'll let that one be 3D as well. Maybe a little bit down there. There we go. Put some shading down on the bottom too. That makes it look good. All right. Do my trees a little bit. There could be some texture and detail on those trees, but in the bush, but they're in that middle ground, so they're not going to be super detailed. All right, so suppose I want my path to be brown, a little brown. I don't want brown because I had that brown, so I won't use too much brown. That's fine. I'll use some orange with that brown. I want it to be more vibrant in the foreground. So whatever color you're using, you can press harder. But I'm going to incorporate some orange in the foreground of the path. And it's going to look like it's closer to me. The grass, when you do the ground, try to color horizontally. It'll look more real and flat. And then add pressure as you come forward. And that'll make the ground look more 3D. Like there's distance in the ground. Down here, I'll start off heavy and then get lighter as we go back. I'll put some yellow green down here in the foreground to make it really vibrant. All right, so now in my really close foreground, I've got this bush. And suppose I want to make it kind of green, but the thing is, it's in the foreground, so I want lots of attention-grabbing detail and information. So it's generally green, so I'll put some dark green in kind of the nooks of it all here. A gentle start. But I want this to have some light and shadow on it. So for light, maybe instead of green, I start incorporating in some yellow. And some yellow green. And then I'm pressing harder on the dark green to show the shadows, but it's still sort of missing something. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about color again. Remember, we learned how green and red are opposite on the color wheel. They're complementary colors. So I'm going to grab my red, and my red I'm going to use for like my really deep textural shadowy nooks in the bush. I don't want it to look like a red bush. It still looks like a green bush, but the red just makes it grab our attention a lot more. It's an artistic strategy. So that bush is now more in the foreground, and it's got more going on to engage the viewer than that stuff in the background there. Now, if you use red and it starts to look too like a clown bush or something, you can always put a little bit of green back over top of that red, and it'll dull down the red just enough so it's not that distracting. This one right here, I haven't finished yet, but my sky is magenta and I have a river instead of a sandy path. Students, this last section right here is called form. Form is when something's three-dimensional, right? And the way we see things is due to light and shadow, right? If you turn off all the lights in a room, let's say you go into a closet, all the lights are off, you can't see things, right? Even if there are three-dimensional things in that closet, you can't see them because there's no light. And we have learned about value already. In my 8th grade drawing class, we learn about value scales, shading with pencil. This is an example of a finished one right here. We have a cube, a cone, and a sphere. And what we're going to do is simulate how does light hit these forms. If I had a single light source, in this case, how would I shade these? So in our activity here, we're going to go through and we're going to shade these forms that I've given you just right so they look realistic and 3D and look like they have form, light and shadow, okay? All right, so we're going to start with the cube. And one of the things I want to highlight to you is this box right here, okay? All right, so when you look at the box like this, I see this corner right here. And my brain wants to say it's like a line, but it's not a line at all. It's actually an edge between darker on the right, or darker on the left, and lighter on the right. You guys see what I mean? So the edge between light and shadow is the reason we see that line. So the same is true when we look at this cube, okay? So if the light source is coming from the upper, let's say that the top of the cube would catch the most light, right? Now this right side of the cube, it would be in the most shadow. And then this front facing part would probably be kind of in between, right? But the key is we don't want to just color this gray. We want to make sure that this edge right here is part of the shading. So I'm not just shading next to a line. I want the line to be part of the shading. So here we go. Start my pencil right there, and we're going to shade this about a 3 value. Remember our value scale, white basically being a 1, black being a 5, and 3 would be that 50% gray. But I want to start at this line really accurately and then shade off of it. And that's what's going to make it look real, by the way. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'll start at this edge right here and pull off of it. And we learned on lesson 1 when we were learning to color our red circle and stay in the lines. We talked about how it's easier to start at the line and color in toward the middle rather than coloring out toward the line. The same is true here when you're shading. If you have an edge or a line that you're trying to start off of, you want to start at the line instead of shading to the line. You could turn your paper different directions as well, whatever makes it more comfortable for you. And I'm trying not to go too dark. This is like a middle gray, right? 50% gray. I've got this line established and then pull off of that. This corner right here is really key. Right there. Now the top, I'm calling it a 1 value. Maybe over here, it might have a little bit of a 2, just a little bit, like right there, just barely touch it. So it seems like this is the highlighted area. And then this here would be my 2 value. And then this far side, this is gonna be like a 4 value, or more like a 5 at the top and kind of become a 4 as it goes down. And the reason is because of reflected light. Light hits the table and then bounces up and it illuminates the shadow side just a little bit. So how do we do this 5? Well, what I'm gonna do is establish a hard edge right there against that line, and then establish a hard edge along the 3 right there. Because it's a 5, it's black, right? So I can be pretty dark here when I make that line. But remember, I don't want to just shade next to that line. I want to make the line become the shading. And that's going to look like the box has a corner rather than a line. And then down here is going to be darker than the 3, but probably not solid dark as it is at the top up there. Now that looks like the box is done, but there would be a cast shadow probably on the ground. This cast shadow is going to go out horizontally, about like right like this. But right here it's going to be a 5. So I'm going to press hard and make a good solid line edge right here and make this solid black right there. And then just sort of let that cast shadow get a little lighter as it gets out there further away. Make it blend a bit. There we go. All right, so now that we're going to move on to the cone, we want to remember though that the light is coming from the upper left, right? So it's not going to be a highlight right on the edge. It's going to be a 2 value, like a little light. And all the shading is going to come from the point of the cone and kind of go downward like this, fanning out. It gets a little wider down here. So what I'll do is I'm going to make this line right here kind of become a 2 value, like really gentle, like that. It's narrow at the top and it spreads out as it goes down just a little bit. Now it's going to go 2 to a 1, which is like the highlight. It's like white, right? And then it's going to go 1 to a 2. So what I'm going to do is skip over the 1 and fade the 1 into a 2, kind of like that. And then go ahead and shade the rest of it that same 2 value. We're going to gradually build up the values. Now a 2 value is the hardest to shade. These are really small, so I'm really holding my pencil very loose and gentle and high up. I'm barely touching the paper. I'm just sort of feather tipping a little bit here. It's probably the most challenging part, is shading lightly. Okay, so the actual order is 2, 1, 2, 3 in the middle, and then 4, 5, 4. And the reason it goes back to 4 is because of that reflected light. Now the 3 is kind of going to be down the middle here, right about here, coming from that top point. And then I'll shade the rest of it that same 3 value. I'm trying to make it look clean down here as well at the bottom of the cone. So it's starting to look more 3-dimensional now. So I've got my 2, 1, 2, 3. Then right around over here on the right, it's going to, that 3 is going to become a 4. And then I'll do all the rest of it, that same 4 value. And then you guys recall how I just said it goes 4, 5, 4. So that 5 is called a core shadow. And this looks 3D right now, but adding that core shadow is going to make a big difference. So the easy way to do that is because it's going to go 4, 5, 4. From the top, I'm going to just draw a dark solid line right through the 4. So it's a 4 on both sides. I'll let it get a little wider at the bottom. So that's my core shadow, but I don't want it to look like a dark solid line. So now what I'm going to do is just do some blending on both sides of it to make it fade into the 4 a little bit nicer, so it doesn't look like a dark solid line. And then finally, it has a triangular cast shadow. The light's coming this way. A cone is a triangle. So from the base here, and kind of underlapping behind it, we're going to have a triangle shadow. But what I want to do here is with a hard outline, I want to draw an edge right there that's a solid 5 value, and then make this solid black coming off. There we go. And that's the cast shadow for the cone. All right, now let's take a look at the sphere. So sneak peek at the finished sphere for a second. All right, let's look at the values. The light's coming from the upper left, so there's going to be a kind of an oval highlight right here. So it's 2, 1, 2, because the 1 is surrounded by the 2. 3, 4, 5, 4. But what we want to realize are a couple things. One, when you do the highlight, we're not just going to draw an oval. We're just going to shade around the highlight, leaving that oval untouched. The other thing, though, is the direction of the shading, all this shadowing here, it starts at the top at what I call 12 o'clock. And look, it actually hooks all the way around to the left side, what I call 9 o'clock, okay? If you only make it straight, or you end all the shadows down here, it's not going to look like a sphere. It's going to look more like a disc, okay? So let's put that into action. Really gently holding my pencil. Just going to touch the pencil to the paper and do some kind of circular motions surrounding the highlight with a 2 value. You see? And then when you've got that one value to the 2 transition, now we just shade the rest of it that same 2 value shade. So that's all I care about at first, is getting the 1 to the 2. Now I'm going to go to the 3 value. Remember, the 3 value starts up here, right? The line of the circle kind of begins the 3 value at that 12 o'clock spot. And what I like to do is sort of get it started right here. And I know I'm going to shade and come around to the left side. So now what I like to do is jump to the left side and get that part started for a 3 value. Kind of like this. And now that I have my start and my end like that, now I'm just going to bridge that gap. You want to try to keep it really rounded. You don't want to look like a straight line or anything. So I'm doing circular motions. That helps me when I do that. So this is the 3 value. And then when you feel like you have that transition to the 3 value pretty good, now we shade the rest of the circle that same 3 value. Are you guys noticing a lot of commonalities in how I'm talking about these between the cube and the cone and the sphere, as far as building up the values and all that. Okay, so it's starting to look pretty good. I've got the highlight surrounded by a 2, the 2 to the 3. Now I'm going to go 3 to the 4. Again, starting at that 12 o'clock spot right about there. Going to build it up a little bit darker. Get it started. And I know I'm going to be ending around at that 9 o'clock spot right about here. I just use the line of the circle, the edge of the circle, to be my start, like that. Getting that 4 value. And now I just need to start pressing harder here and kind of bridge that connection between the top and the bottom there. Once you get that 4 value transition from the 3 to the 4, make sure you get it all the way out to the edge of the circle as a 4 value. Remember, 4 is dark. It's just not solid black dark. Okay, so it's feeling pretty good here, but it actually goes 4. It doesn't just go 4, it goes 4, 5, 4. That 5 is called the core shadow, and it really makes it pop. It really makes it look really round. So what I'll do is similar to the cone. I start at this 12 o'clock spot right about here, and I'm going to draw a hard black line curve right through the center of the 4 value. But don't end it down here at the bottom. Try to hook it up around the left side a little bit, like that. Now that I have that awkward black line, now what I want to do is I just want to do some blending. Do little circular motions. And just blend that solid black line into the 4 on both sides. And then that way it's not going to look like a solid black line anymore. And that's it. Now I just have to worry about the cast shadow. The cast shadow will start at the very bottom base and go straight out like this. And it's kind of like a half oval, like that. But the key is the start of the cast shadow needs to be a 5. Because this reflected light is a 4, I'm going to do a hard edged outline right here of the cast shadow and then make that solid black. Okay? And then fill that in.